All right, so if I lose my internet connection, you guys take over and just teach this.
I'm passionate, but I'll let Mr. Sorensen here talk. He has experience.
I don't think our passion and my experience can make up for William. So
No, that's true. That's true.
Hello, this is William DeMille. It's good to be here. Just a couple more minutes and we'll get started. So I'll be teaching this tonight.
okay, so if anybody has a question during this, and you might say this, William, and remind people, but you can type it into the chat box. Ezekiel is going to help moderate that. So just type your questions in there, and then Ezekiel is also the co-host, so he can unmute. We'll probably just keep everybody muted just so there's not background noise. And just as a reminder, this is being recorded. I've also put in the chat box a link to be able to subscribe to William's newsletter, to be able to stay in touch of future events that are happening on the ranch and online. So just click on that link, enter your email, and you'll stay in touch with everything that William's got going on.
Thank you, Jared.
Hey, and everybody, you be kind of cool to see where everybody's from too. Maybe if you can find the chat box, just type in where you're from. It'd be neat to see how far and wide this webinar is reaching.
Layton, Texas, Enoch, Blackfoot, South Carolina, Saratoga, Ogden. Perfect. It looks like we've got a good group here. A lot of different climates to talk about. New Mexico, huh? That's cool. All right. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started here. So my name is William DeMille, and I'm a lifelong farmer. I've been farming all my life. I grew up in Hurricane, Utah, and I was helping my dad in the family garden since I was a child, and I always loved that. And we would grow a majority of our food in the garden. So that was kind of a big deal for us. And so that was a fun thing for me as a child. And I didn't like school, but I loved the farm and the garden. I loved the cattle and the horses and the sheep and all the different animals that we had. So that was just a great childhood that I had. But gardening was my first love. It was the thing that I just really enjoyed. I learned to read because I wanted to learn gardening better. And so I read all the gardening books that my dad had. And it was interesting because at that time in my life, well, not just my life, but in history, gardening books were mostly printed along the East Coast, the upper Midwest, like Chicago, and up and down the East of the United States. So the information in those gardening books was not very practical for the where I lived, which was on the border of the Mojave Desert in Hurricane, Utah. So, but there was a lot to learn. I did learn a lot from the gardening books over the years. I read more than I can count, and so it was a good education I had as a child and a teenager. And I live in the foothills of the Humboldt Mountains in northern Nevada right now. But I've farmed in a lot of different climates and different areas of the United States, mostly in the deserts. The Great Basin Desert is where I live now. That's technically inside in Monticello, Utah, and of course Riverton, Utah. So all that is in the Great Basin Desert. And sometimes we don't think of the Western United States. Much of it is a desert. Almost all of Nevada is technically a desert. And so different climate, and gardening is a little bit different there. And then in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, gardening was certainly different there. And Southern California, right on the ocean, I grew a lot of food there as well. So I've lived in several places, a lot of different kinds of growing conditions, a lot of different climates, and a lot of different microclimates. So that's just a little bit about me. And the way we're going to do this class, this is going to go for 20 weeks. I'm going to just get on here every Thursday night. The main purpose of this class is to be a question and answer. And I'm just answering from my own experience and the things that I've learned. And it doesn't mean that I'm right for sure, but I can grow pretty good food. And I've been dealing with people a lot over the years for 17 years. People grow food. So let me see if I can go to the next slide here. Somewhere there's a slide that I wanted to show you. So right here, this is why I'm teaching this class. There are food shortages in the world. It'll be interesting to see how much the United States feels the food shortages. The American dollar is usually pretty strong with world food supplies. And so in the history of the United States, I don't think we've really felt serious food shortages. There certainly were some in the Great Depression. There's been some other times in history when there were some food shortages, but there hasn't been starvation like we've seen on other continents. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I don't think it will. The number one way to fight food shortages is to grow enough food for yourself. And so that's one reason I'm doing this class. I want my friends to grow that are pretty easy to answer. And I keep getting the same questions for 20 years. I've got the same questions. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to get on here and create this class, and I'm going to try to answer that for people. Our future food supplies could be unstable just with current events happening in the world. We don't know, but that is one of my motivations for doing this class. So it's going to be 20 weeks long, and then it's probably a good idea. And I could just keep going. I don't mind doing this for the rest of my life. So it just depends on popular interest on how long we do this class. Sometimes I get questions and people say, how do I grow food without going to the store and buying a bunch of stuff? And that's pretty much the way I've grown food all along. And I don't really espouse a particular method. I don't really say that this is the right way and all those other methods are wrong. There's a lot of gardeners who do say that kind of thing. I don't really buy into that. I don't really think it's true. I do think that we need to be focusing on ways to grow food that don't take a lot of inputs from the store. If our garden is dependent on potting soil and fertilizer and all that other stuff that you could buy to grow a garden, then your garden's not going to be as good as it could be if you didn't buy all that stuff. So that's kind of my method, is to just grow things with what is and how to create a functioning soil so that we don't have to add a lot of inputs to that soil system. Okay, so let me just let's go over some upcoming events. They're going to be happening. These are things that we are doing. I'm only going to spend about 1 minute on this, but I am an educator on gardening, and I teach classes all the time, and I charge for those. This class is a free class, and that's what we're on right now, is that second one down. This is our weekly Q&A where you can come and you can ask your questions, and I will do my best to answer them and help you have the best garden ever. The first one up there are my online classes. I have a Patreon account, and there's it's a $8 subscription each month where you can get on, and I have over 300 posts on there. Most of those are videos in me and my garden of how to do everything. So if you're not getting your questions answered in this free one, you could certainly sign up for that one and just watch all the videos, and then you can see where I'm coming from with all of the fun things that I'm talking about in these free classes on Thursday night. I do have a boot camp coming up. This is my 3-day class I do. This is an annual event. It's $500, and it's the last week of April. So that is coming up. You would travel here to the ranch, and I'll try to simplify the complexities of growing food. So this is a class for people who have never grown food, or even people who are, more advanced and they want to hone their skills. But we take it from the very basics, and by the time you leave, you should be able to go home, put in a garden, and have food growing in your farm. And then you can read all of these others here, and you can take a quick screenshot of this if you're interested in these other classes. But all of this information is in my website down here, georgicrevolution.com. So if you're interested in growing food this year, all of these.
Hey, William.
Paul, I hate to interrupt you, but your audio's cut out. You should step.
I have all these.
Hey, William, just a second.
Yeah,
go ahead,
Derek.
Ezekiel.
Oh, Pa, your audio is cutting out pretty frequently. Do you think you could step into the living room instead of in your lab? Your network might work a little bit better in there. I hate to interrupt, but I couldn't fix it remotely.
Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. We'll get this figured out and dialed in. So.
Okay, we're gonna try to get this fixed here.
Got some good interaction going, and William will. I don't know if the recording will have picked that up or not, but we kind of lost the last probably 60 seconds, William. So Ezekiel recommended trying to move to the living room.
Okay, we're gonna move to a different room and fix let me unplug my microscope. Here we go.
So again, for those of you who weren't on at the beginning, welcome you to just type in the chat where you're from. We've got a pretty broad audience. It's pretty awesome to be able to hear from so many people across the United States, especially if you're from out of country. I don't know, maybe you'll get a special prize if you're the furthest away. And then also William will be, or Ezekiel will be moderating on some of the questions. So try to keep your questions concise and just type them in the chat box, and then at the appropriate time he can ask them, or we can unmute you if you need further clarification on your question. So thanks for bearing with us with the audio part. We'll get this figured out and dialed in by next week, and it'll be smooth sailing.
Okay, let's try this again. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we're good now, William. Thank you.
It's a lot smoother.
Okay, is this better? So I should talk or you won't know if it's better. I
Yep.
didn't even think of that.
It's a lot
I'm not
better.
the tech guy. Okay. All right. So type in that text thing if it's working. Okay. All right. So it looks like it's better. So anyway, here's a picture of your teachers. If you come to any of around, like I said, computers are not my hotspot. I can grow food, but we're going to learn together on this computer thing. So if you want to come to these classes, these are the people that will be teaching them here on the ranch. So Jared and Selena Sorensen, they own the ranch here where I live. So that is the overview of this 20 weeks. So I have over 100 slides put together that I can share from. And I have enough information in some of the slides that I could do a whole hour presentation on one slide. Like this slide could be a good 45-minute conversation. So this is not about me telling you all the cool things I've learned over the last 30 years of gardening. It's about helping you have super good, like really good gardens this year. So if you want to you know, type your questions in there and we can start getting those in there, because what I've found is people usually have the same problems year after year. Things like blossom end rot in tomatoes, where the end of it gets rotten, and then you go to pick your tomato and there's a big black ugly spot underneath of it. So that's a question that I get all the time, and it's pretty easy to fix. When you plant your transplants of tomatoes, have a big handful of eggshells that you've saved, crush them up. You could even put them in a blender and get that calcium in there under the tomato transplant as you put it in the soil. And that usually gets enough available calcium in the soil that your tomato plant will do well and it won't have blossom end rot. Now, after having said that, it's important to understand that blossom end rot, okay, first of all, certainly it is a calcium deficiency, but it's also a genetic weakness. If you have a certain variety and it's getting blossom end rot a lot, you want to plant maybe, if it's feasible, 100 or 200 or 500 plants of that variety, and only save seed from the ones that don't exhibit the blossom end rot. And after a few generations of that, may be something that may be a little bit beyond what you want to do, but it's interesting how many professional farmers don't do that, and they could do that, and it would save them a huge headache. So yeah, if you have plant breeding questions, you can ask those. I see these questions coming in here, and I'll start going through these here. But you can ask me anything about farming, anything about agriculture. We can talk about soils, diseases, how to grow in containers, potting soil mixes, all that kind of stuff. And we can talk about a lot of those things. So let me see here and go to a question. So soil is one question we have for raised boxes. Let me see, it keeps flipping up because people are typing. So, okay, so raised boxes, raised beds. I was trying to see if I need to scroll back down and find that again and see who asked it, because I might know where you live. When you ask a question, tell me where you live. If nothing else, just tell me the state where you're from. That way I'll know if you're in the desert or in the Great Plains or on the East Coast. That matters. I'm trying to find that and see if I know who asked that. Oh, Jody Jarvis, I think she's in northern Utah. So yeah, okay, so there's several things in that question about raised boxes, raised beds. Raised beds are good, great, they're fun, they're wonderful. They are the wrong thing to do in the deserts. And everybody does them in the Great Basin Desert. That's Utah, a lot of Arizona, all of Nevada, parts of Idaho. Everybody loves them. Everybody does them. The gardening books all say to do them. Don't change what the garden you already have just because I said that. Keep the moisture in. So soil, go to Home Depot or any big box store that sells garden soil. If you have a greenhouse that you have a relationship with, like a mom and pop shop, support those people for sure, and go ask them what their favorite potting soil mix is, and they probably have a prepared mix you can get. If you need to make your own mix, I would do 1/2. I hate telling you this, but it's a pretty good mix, and most people can do it, because what I do is I make my own compost, and it's so much better. But if you don't have access to do that kind of stuff, the easy way to do this is you go buy a good high quality potting soil at the like a Walmart or a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and then you mix it halfway with peat moss. Okay, and then you're going to want to add some things in. Let me see if I'm going to look for my slide here, because I actually have a slide on this, and then you can take a screenshot of it. Okay. Potting soil. Okay, here we go. I'm going to make that bigger. Okay, everybody take a screenshot of this. Here's the thing. I have a worm farm, so I create my own worm castings. That's the best potting soil in the world. You do have to kind of know what you're doing to make worm castings proper. I can answer that question later. But if you mix 1 part peat moss and 1 part of a good potting soil, it says the cheapest here. You get what you pay for. You may want maybe a medium priced one. If you get the really expensive ones, they're filled with chemical fertilizers. I don't really like those because they kill the microbes in the soil. They will certainly grow food. So if you just want to grow food, that's fine. The nutrition in the food will not be as high. I used to question that statement I just made, but the recent research being done in the last 10 years on the food quality being grown with the chemical fertilizers and in more organic type systems, the verdict has been made, and it actually is much more healthy to grow it in more natural systems. But you know, it's a place to start. And you want to arrive at a really good organic system in the future, but you don't have to start there right now. Okay. So yeah, mix half peat moss, half of a potting soil. And then for each 5-gallon bucket worth in there, add some ground eggshells, bone meal, blood meal, alfalfa meal, and azomite. Azomite is something you will purchase. If you're in Utah, Allie's Garden Center in Laverkin, Utah. I haven't talked to her for about 3 years. I hope she's still in business, but she carries it. You can get it online. Alfalfa meal, you get at a feed store, or you get a bale of alfalfa hay and you mix it in. Blood meal is something you can buy. If you're doing your own butchering of animals, save the blood, dry it out. If you're in a town, if you're living in a city, it does stink. So as it dries out, it takes time. So maybe that's something that's a little more advanced and not practical for everyone to do. Bone meal is something you would purchase. If you had a way to grind the bones of the animals that you're butchering, that'd be awesome. Most people eat eggs. You can keep the eggshells and grind them up. This will give you a pretty good place to start for a soil. Okay, so for those of you on the East Coast, for those of you in California, all the way up through Oregon, Washington, in those climates on the East Coast and the West Coast, if you have slugs, if slugs are a problem, raised bed boxes are not good, because between the side of the box and where your soil is, the slugs will get down in there. They'll hide in there during the daylight hours. At night, they'll come out and they eat all your plants. So I steer away from raised boxes for that reason. Usually in the deserts, like the Great Basin Desert, the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sonoran Desert, or the Mojave Desert, we normally don't have slug problems. Once in a while in a city, the cities have changed the climate enough that we have in the cities, because we're watering so much. We have so many shade trees that slugs can come in from nurseries like California. We plant a plant, it was infested with slugs. Our watering system is watering our yards all the time, and so now slugs are a problem. Okay, so that was hopefully that helped a little bit with raised beds. Okay, let me see about the next question here. Okay. Okay, here's a question. I think this is in order. I don't want to miss any questions. You're gonna have to help me, Ezekiel, to not miss questions.
Yes, there's one question that I think it would be good if you went back to. When you cut out a little bit when you were explaining why raised beds are not ideal in the Western deserts.
Okay. Okay, I have a map here. And we'll talk about this just a little bit. Okay, there's 4 in the United States. I actually think there's 5. So we're going to be on these 2 slides for a second. But the biggest desert is our own minds. There's a lot of drought in minds of people because we think things that are gardening over the years, and a lot of it is appropriate for areas other than where you are gardening, and yet people keep trying to do it that way, and then they struggle with gardening a lot. But it's interesting to know of the 5 deserts in North America. So we have the Great Basin Desert, the Mojave, the Sonoran, and the Chihuahuan. And I know that I live here. I live in the Great Basin Desert. I've also lived on the border of the Mojave when I lived in Hurricane, Utah. This map kind of shows that the Mojave is lower, and it's probably accurate. But the plants that grow in Hurricane and St. George, Utah, they're the same plants that are growing in the Mojave. They're not the plants that grow in the Great Basin Desert. So there's that little microclimate of the Mojave that comes right up there, right on the border. And so it's very interesting to know this. And this is just a foundational thing to know and to understand, because it can really help us to see that the way we are gardening, we may want to do things very different than all of the awesome food production that happens in California and Oregon and the Midwest and the East. So we do have to do things quite different quite often. Okay, so Becky says, very new to the idea to grow enough food to feed my family. How do I know how much to plant? Okay, so that's a good question. I wish I could answer that. Let me think that through. So how much you need to plant is very much related to how much you eat. I've had a lot of people over the years just tell me in general that they don't want to plant a garden because so much goes to waste. Well, my answer to that is, well, don't grow something if you're not going to eat it. You know, they say we grow 50 tomato plants, but nobody in my family likes tomatoes. My answer to that is, why would you plant a tomato plant if you don't eat them? So you need to identify what it is you want to eat. That is really the first place to start here. Identify what you want to eat, and then make a plan from there. Do you eat spinach and kale and chard, cabbage, green onions? If the answer is yes, then you probably can have a pretty awesome spring, fall, and winter garden. If you had a small greenhouse, you could grow most of those things, all year long in a well-designed greenhouse. So, if you're more of the warm season crop person, that would be tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, eggplant, squashes, and melons. If you love those things, then you could have a pretty awesome summer garden. But about, how much to plant, there's a great book out there. It's an older book. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but it's called Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew. He was pretty popular. He had a TV series, and in the gardening community, when you say square foot gardening, most people know what you're talking about. But he had pretty good charts on each specific plant. You could probably look that up online and see how much one square foot would produce of each plant. I mean, I could tell you right now that 1 square foot, so if your garden was 12 inches by 12 inches, which would be a pot, you could plant 1 broccoli plant and produce 1 broccoli head in your growing season. If you had a greenhouse, you could probably get 3 of those in a 12-month period. So that's not enough to feed a family, but you could do the multiplication and you could figure that out. If it was lettuce in 1 square foot, you could grow 4 heads of lettuce in 1 square foot. If you wanted leaf lettuce, you could just plant the whole thing to a leaf lettuce type, and then you could cut it like 4 or 5 times in the cool season, once, maybe twice in the hot season. If you're in a hot desert region, like say St. George, Utah, on the border of the Mojave, you won't be growing that in the summer, but it grows awesome in the winter. So the way to know how much food to grow, that's a complicated, it's a very complicated answer to give. I haven't really thought of that, but I'll do some videos on that, and I'll be putting those on my Patreon page for sure. But that would probably take an hour. We'd have to sit down and like really talk about that. And it would depend on your climate. It would depend on a lot of factors on how much food to grow to feed your family. But first of all, you need to know how much your family eats. And if you're a salad family and you eat a lot of salad, then you would want to say, okay, do we go through a bag of salad once a week, or are we eating one of those once a day? And then you could figure that 1 salad, you can produce one, like on 1 square foot, you could cut that leaf lettuce and it would produce a salad for 1 person for 1 meal. And so you might need, if you had a big family, you may need a 3-foot wide bed that was 10 feet long. And then if you're going 12 months of the year, you would be replanting that once a month to be able to grow that out. Hopefully that kind of got some ideas rolling in your head. But that's more of a conversation that needs to be had instead of a quick answer. But that's an awesome question. Good to thank you for asking that.
There's some questions on worm composting, kind of similar, and what species of worms do you introduce?
Okay,
How do you do
so
it?
yeah, so worm composting, so vermiculture. I have a lot of worms. I love worm composting. I am using most of my potting soil to start all my plants this year with pure worm castings. It's working fantastic. I use a mixture of red worms. The red wigglers is what they're called. If you look up worms on the internet, they're called red wigglers. The scientific name is Icenia federa. And then I use the European night crawlers. They're a larger worm. They have distinct stripes around them, so they're easy to tell what they are. And their scientific name is Icenia hortensis. And those are the two best worms. They're the easiest to get if you just order worms. I actually sell worms. If you wanted to get worms, I could send you some. But they're on the internet. You can order them. So if you ordered a pound of each variety from a worm dealer and you put those in a compost, they will make your compost better. So what I do is I make a hot compost. I turn it, and it takes about 4 to 6 weeks before it cools off. Once it cools off, I will add the worms to the compost, and then they will start eating it, and they'll eat that compost for a long time, like 6 months, maybe even a year, and they make the compost better. They make it a better plant nutrient, and they help to enhance the beneficial microbes that are in the soil. They make the bacteria, the fungus, protozoa, nematodes better, like a higher population in that compost. And so when you harvest that after a year and use that in your garden, it's like a miracle. It's the most wonderful stuff in the world. So you can just use a box. You can just make a little box and you put compost in there. But let me be clear on compost. When I say compost, a lot of people think of kitchen scraps. Those can be used, but if that's all you're feeding your worms are not going to do very good. I see a lot of people kill their worms because it's mostly kitchen scraps that they're putting and feeding their worms. I don't really like those kinds of systems. There's a lot of YouTube videos that are showing that happening, and I just don't know that those people are actually multiplying their worms very good, because I don't think it would work, because there's probably quite a bit of anaerobic activity in there. Worms need a lot of oxygen. And so what I do is I will just get a container. You could even do this in a 5-gallon bucket, but I would just put in maybe like a couple of inches of a peat moss in the bottom, or a finished compost if you already have it, or if you have a really good garden soil that's really loose and wonderful, put that in the bottom. And then above that, just put in things that are already decomposing, like rotten hay, old rotten leaves. Those would be perfect things to put in there. So I would get them wet, wring all the water out, and then put them on top. The worms will work through that. But I would never turn that. You don't want to turn a vermicomposting system. 99% of all of the YouTubes that I've seen with people showing worm farms, they're turning that. And every time you do that, it disrupts the home for the worm, and it's probably killing a bunch of them also. So that worries me, because I think there's people getting bad information on how to raise worms. But I would just add maybe 2 or 3 inches every week of rotten old hay. It could be barnyard manure that has gotten a little bit older, like maybe 6-month-old cow pies. You could crush those up, put them in there to feed the worms. So that would work really well to feed those worms. So after maybe 3 months, that 5-gallon bucket will basically be full. You want to keep it at about 70% moisture. So just mist that that whole bucket, like probably once a day. If you had a squirt bottle, you would just mist it. Never pour water in there. They sell those commercial worm bins, and they have, some of them have a tray on the bottom so you can get worm tea out of them. That concerns me. That really worries me, because if you have enough moisture going through that system, the moisture is dripping out into the tray on the bottom, then your worms are way too wet. There's not going to be enough moisture in there, or excuse me, there will be too much moisture in there. There won't be enough oxygen in there. There's too much water in that organic matter for the worms to thrive. They're going to be struggling to live. So I don't know, whoever invented that, I mean, I'm glad they invented a great invention, but it's not good for your worms. And I feel really bad if the inventor of that invention sees this. I don't want to hurt anybody in their product, but that's the wrong environment for a worm. The way that you get worm tea is, let's say that 5-gallon bucket got filled up after 2 months of putting in a couple of inches in once a week. And then you keep it misted for another 2 or 3 months. So let's just say we're at 6 months of these worms being in there. And you could even wait maybe a year. Okay. And if it shrinks down, because this continues to decompose, add some more material. So at 6 months or a year would be a good time. Dump that bucket out on a table, probably not your kitchen table, but dump it out where you can work with it, spread it out, and pick all your adult worms out and put them in a brand new bucket. And then all of the little worms that are in there, you can just leave those guys in the mix, because there's going to be so little, it's hard to pick them out. But if you see a high concentration of little ones, they can go in another worm bin too. At this point, you have two options. You could take some of that soil and you could put it in the bottom of 4 or 5 other buckets to start new little worm farms. Your second option would be to take that worm casting, which is your compost, you take that and you would put it in a mesh bag, like a paint strainer bag that you get at a hardware store that goes in a 5-gallon bucket. Take a handful of that, put it in the strainer, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and you slosh it in there a lot. And you don't want to scrape it and smash it at all. Just slosh it up and down a lot, and it hard, but gently massage that while it's in the water, and your water will turn a dark chocolate color. And so you would massage that and slosh it around for about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. And what you have done is you have made a worm tea or a compost extract. So I'm saying that a worm tea and a compost extract are the same thing. There may be somebody out there who disagrees with that, and that's okay. You can be right. I don't really know the definition of a worm tea, but that's what I would call it. But a compost extract is certainly what you have made. Okay. Now at that time you can take that and you can use that like a fertilizer to put on your soil in your garden beds. And that will be one of the best things you can do for fertilizing in the world.
Some other questions here about worms. While you're on worms, what do you feed them if you don't live on a farm? How do they get air in a 5-gallon bucket? And how do you know if a worm is an adult worm? We like worms, I guess.
Do I have pictures of a worm in here? I don't know if I do. We can get a picture of a worm for another week for sure. I don't think I have a picture of a worm. Let me just look real fast. I do have pictures of worms. Let me scroll down. The way that you get air inside of the 5-gallon bucket is by misting it instead of like drenching it filled with water. I think the worm picture was down here, but I don't know if it was.
Detail said maybe try shutting off your camera just to see if that improves the video feed.
Okay, so I shut my camera off to try to improve the video here. Okay, I don't have a close-up picture of a worm. I thought I had one. the close-ups are of seeds and other things there. But here is a picture of big worms. So let me make that bigger there. And then let me see if I can see one here. So on the head of the worm, you have, it's not really showing a good picture, but on the very point of the worm, like right, I can't even see, like right there, there's the mouth of a worm right here. Like hopefully, can you guys see my cursor?
Yeah.
On this screen?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So there's the point of the worm. So behind that, maybe like 15 or 20 rings back, there's a ring right there that is a different color. And that is the clitellum of the worm. And that is the sexual organ of the worm. So all worms are both male and female. They have both male and female parts. So when worms mate, they will exchange genetic material with each other. And then they both create eggs and a sac that the eggs are in. And so they both lay eggs, which is pretty awesome. And so you don't have to worry about having boys and girls because they're all boys and girls. But the way that you tell if it's an adult is it's sexually mature and it will have that ring behind it. And that's a really bad picture right there, but it's the best I can do tonight. But if you just pick up an earthworm and look at it, if it's a big old earthworm, on the mouth end of him, just back a little ways, there's that distinct ring, and it's usually thicker and it's usually a different color than the rest of the worm. That's how you tell. As far as the oxygen, just don't get it too wet. If you're misting it every day and the soil is moist around, between like 60-70% moisture, then they're gonna be doing good. And you're gonna ask me what's 60 or 70% moisture. If you pick up a handful of this worm material and you squeeze it in your hand, and you can like squeezing it as hard as you can, if it produces one drop, that's in that 50, 60, 70 range of moisture. If you squeeze it and you are getting a drip, 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 it is way too wet. You're not gonna have enough oxygen. Your worms will die. If you have a foul smell coming from that worm bin, it is anaerobic. Your worms are gonna die. Okay. So as far as food goes, if you don't live on a farm, if you live in if you have a yard and you have grass clippings, you can feed them grass clippings. You can feed them leaves from trees. You can feed them pretty much any organic matter that rots and dies. So, yeah, everybody should have a worm farm to some extent. I have a pretty big one and I'm going to make a bigger one.
Some questions about fruit trees. Said you just ordered trees and be planting them in mid-April. What advice do you have to get them started strong and decrease planting shock from Durango, Colorado, and somebody from Southern Utah County? That's the same one.
Okay, cool. Perfect.
It's worth noting that they are at about between 5,000 and 6,000 feet elevation.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, fruit trees. Dig your hole for the fruit tree twice as deep and twice as wide as the pot it came in. If it's bare root and it's not in a pot, look at the roots. And if the roots are about 12 inches across and about 12 inches deep, then make your hole about 24 inches deep and about 24 inches across. And then you're going to put the tree down in there at the same depth as it was growing in the pot. Don't plant it deeper. Don't plant it shallower. It needs to be at the same depth. And then the number one killer of fruit trees is people think that compost and manure is a good idea to put on gardens. And so they put a lot of that in the hole when you plant it. Don't do that. So it's hard to give soil advice to people from around the country because every soil is different. The very best thing you can do is find a person in your local area who has planted fruit trees recently, like in the last 20 years, that's recent for a tree. So find people who have planted a fruit tree and then ask them like how they did it. If there's a good nurseryman in your area, ask them. a lot of the times your university people who teach the master gardening classes can be a really good resource for your local area on fruit trees. But for me to give you good information is to not start telling you a bunch of technical stuff about the soil, because it could be very different from region to region across the country. So the main thing is you want a good deep soil without hard pans. If you're digging down and you're hitting a hard pan, so if you get 6 inches deep and it feels like concrete, dig that out so you get past that, so that your hole is a good 2 feet deep before planting that tree. Because if you plant it on top of a hard pan, it's going to hurt your tree. So a hard pan is just a compacted layer under the surface of the soil, and those can appear anywhere from 1 inch to 5 inches, 10 inches, 20 inches. So hard pans are just a compacted layer. Okay.
Can you put fish in the soil when you plant trees? Like, are there any amendments that you would add if it's not manure and compost?
I would. This is where you need to check with your local experts on trees, because what you add at the time of planting is it matters. So you need to talk to your local people. If you're in northern Utah, go to Cook's Nursery in where are they at? They're in like Orem or Layton, not Layton, Orem, or I think it's Linden. Somewhere. They're right on the freeway. If you know where the Harley Davidson place is, right on I-15. But Cook's Nursery, those guys are experts on trees. They know the difference between the soils in Saratoga Springs and in Genola and Payson and Salt Lake City. They know all those different soils, and they can tell you exactly what to do. So wherever you are in the country, you need to find a local nurseryman who can tell you. But generally, you never really put fertilizers mixed in the soil down there at the root zone. It can hurt trees to do that. There are some products that are safe. 99% of the time they're not. What you would do is you would add those products to the soil surface around the tree, and then as you water, those nutrients will percolate down through into the soil. So there's just some general guidelines to start with. But when it comes to fruit trees, find a local expert that knows your soils. They're out there. You can find them.
How much worm casting do you give a plant and or worm tea?
Okay, so the worm castings, I hardly ever just put the worm castings on, because if I took 1 cup of worm casting, I can spread that in like a 1 pot. Okay, but if I make a tea out of it, I can make it 10 or 20 times more, and so I could do 10 or 20 plants that I could fertilize with that worm casting. So I usually like to make the extract. It only takes 5 minutes, the way I just explained it a minute ago, and then you can just water your plants with that worm tea. So that works really good. But if I had a pot, say I had a 5-gallon bucket that I was growing a tomato plant in, and I just wanted to use the solid worm casting, I would use half of a cup, and I would sprinkle it right on top of the pot, on the soil surface, and then I would put a mulch on top of there, like 2 inches of straw or a couple of inches of alfalfa hay right on top, because that would help to hold the moisture in. If your worm castings dry out from the sun, it kills the microbes that are in them. And 99% of the goodness of the worm casting are the bacteria, protozoa, fungus, nematodes, microarthropods, all those microscopic life that's inside that worm casting. That's the good stuff. So if you just sprinkle it on top without covering it to keep it moist, they die.
Good. So 1 on trees while we're there, and then we've got one about clay soil. So I'll just read it. On fruit trees is the same kind of early succession fungus that is created in compost, good for tree roots, since trees are late succession.
Okay, who asked that question?
That was from Ezekiel, and was that in
Okay.
certain area?
So, yeah, so succession. Yeah, so the fruit trees, when you plant the fruit tree, you want to be able to have all the microorganisms in place to properly fertilize that fruit tree. But you do want more fungus than bacteria. So your fungal to bacterial ratio, you want the fungal component to be high. So the way that you would get that is when you make your compost, you're going to need a lot of woody materials, like a lot of wood chips in that compost, because the wood chips will be the fungus food. So in the compost, while the fungus is growing, the fungus is going to, there's going to be a lot of it. And you would want to have less greens in the compost because that's the bacterial food. And so what you're trying to do is to create a natural ecosystem that would have where trees naturally grow. So you said succession. I think for a lot of people listening to this, they may have not heard a lot about ecological succession. So I'm going to tell you what that is in a nutshell. Early succession is when the soil first forms. So if we go out into nature and we see a sand dune, that is in the earliest succession. Bare rock, bare stone is early succession. And then mosses and lichens start to grow on the rock. And then in later succession, annual grasses will grow, annual weeds that we hate in our gardens, like the red root amaranths and lamb's quarters, those start to grow. So those are all early succession plants. Late succession, think of a jungle in Hawaii, or think of the redwoods, though that would be late succession. So nature is always trying to get to late succession. So if I go out and I till up a field, then it thinks that there's been an ecological catastrophe happen. And so all of the weeds are going to start growing because we woke those up by causing a natural disaster with a tillage event. And then the weeds are going to be stimulated, they're going to grow, and that will add organic matter to the soil, which puts it into a later succession. So that was a nutshell. And if that confused you, we can keep talking about that for the next 20 weeks.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about clay soils. Question specifically is it possible to get the 5 spheres in clay soil? What do you do when you just have this, really hard soil that you're starting with? You're trying to grow a garden in it.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to. Okay, here's my slides. I'm going to go up here. I have a slide on soil. So soils. I want to find that slide because it will simplify this a lot. But clay soils, the number one thing with clay soils is add organic matter. Okay, you want to add a lot of organic matter. That's the main thing that you want to do.
What are those sources of organic?
Organic matter is old hay, it's barnyard manure, it's compost, it's leaves from trees, it's grass clippings, it's growing lots of plants in the soil. That would also be the because growing the plants in the soil, it's going to create your organic matter that you need. Okay, so that would be pretty awesome. If you have a sandy soil, that's the opposite of a clay soil. What do? It's the very same thing. Add tons and tons of organic matter to the soil. The more organic matter you can add, the better. I've heard soil scientists before say, oh, you don't want to get over 10% organic matter in your soil, because if you do, then your fertilizer is not going to work. And they start talking about all these things. But I think that's crazy, because in the horticulture world, I learned this in college when I went to horticulture school, We use a soilless soil. It's 100% organic matter. You go buy starts at a local nursery, it's going to be 100% organic matter. So it doesn't really make sense. The best plants we can grow, the best plants I've personally grown in my life, is the 100%. So we can certainly grow that. So if we look at this slide here, you know, too much clay. Here's what I do. I don't till. That's a whole different discussion, but I haven't tilled gardens for a long time, and my gardens are doing better because I don't. So what do? If I have just a bunch of clay out there and I've struggled to garden, the first thing I will do is stop tilling, because tilling a clay soil makes gardening harder. I want to make it easier. So what do? I add 3 inches of compost on top of that soil, and then I put my transplants in it. I water it appropriately, and it grows a pretty good garden. It's the same with sand. I add 3 inches of compost, and then I put my transplants in, and I start gardening. I grow in it. But what if your soil is super compacted? That's one of the #1 problems with a clay soil, is the compaction. It's the same answer. So hopefully from looking at this slide, you can see that the way I garden is quite a bit, it's kind of too simple here. I didn't mean to change the slide, sorry, but if we add that compost on top and we never till it in, so every year add 1 to 3 inches of compost, and then you just put your transplants in that compost, your gardens generally will thrive, especially in the deserts. If you're in one of those areas that we looked at on that map earlier in the Western United States, you can garden a lot easier this way. Lots of compost on top of the soil, and it will fix your clay problem. It fixes your sand problem. It fixes your compaction problem. It fixes your weed problems. Now, what about quackgrass and morning glory? These are 2 huge things. I get these questions hundreds of times every couple of years. You know, I'm always getting this question. It can be hard to get rid of these noxious weeds. The perennial weeds, they grow. They are the worst weed there is. They can cost you everything, because people will sometimes give up because these weeds take over your garden. But you can kill these out by putting down a thick layer of cardboard. You can't have any cracks in this cardboard. Quackgrass and morning glory will find their way through cardboard. But if you put down 3 or 4 layers, so it's about 1 inch thick, and then put down about 5 inches of compost on top, and then put your transplants in, I have killed out quackgrass and morning glory both by doing this method. If you see one little stem of these plants coming up, you get out there and you dig it out the day you see it, and you can eradicate this. I've done it this way and it works. The other thing is, if your soil is drying out too quickly, you could have a thicker compost on there. Maybe you need 5 or 6 inches of compost on top of that soil, and you need a better irrigation system that's working. In our days, technology nowadays, you can have a timer, have sprinklers, have drip lines, whatever you choose to keep that soil working. But anyway, that'll work good. What else?
Let's go to this one real quick, and then back to the compost. What is a source of compost? So Melanie asks, garden problem, too many large pebbles and rocks. What to do? I have a solution. I'll farm out my kids to her. Come on.
If your rocks are smaller than a softball, you don't have a rock problem. Pebbles and stones are a good source of minerals. What you probably have is a tillage problem. When you're tilling the soil, it's causing a problem. You know, so if you wanted to stop tilling, you don't have a problem. A lot of people think that stones and pebbles are serious problems. They're not. You could do an infiltration test just take your garden hose out there, put it on the soil, like in one spot, and just hold it there for about 5 minutes. And if your soil, or if the water is going down in, like, and it just keeps going and going and going, you may have a problem holding enough water in your soil. But if the water is running across the surface of your soil, and it's making a big puddle, and it's not going in the ground, and it's running off onto whatever, the sidewalk or the lawn or wherever, then you don't have a good infiltration soil, and so it's not getting down in there. So you could have two issues with pebbles and rocks. Usually if it's solid pebbles and rocks, here's what I would do. I would add 5 inches of compost on top of that. I would put my transplants in, forget the rocks, enjoy doing a lot less labor because you'll never have to till your garden again. What do you do next year? Add another 2 or 3 inches of compost and add in your transplants, and just enjoy your garden. And as you do this with adding the compost, you don't need to, you won't have a lot of weeds to pick. You'll have a lot less weeds because they don't like to germinate in compost. They just don't like it. And so you have less weeds, you have less watering, you have less problems with water infiltrating. It will infiltrate good. And then if you do have a really hard, like if say it was a driveway you're trying to garden, you could do this on a driveway that's gravel, that's been driven on for 10 years. And it's probably the most compacted place in the world. If you put 6 inches of compost on there, it would heal the hard pans under there probably within 5 years, as long as the microbes are present. And they probably would be if you're adding that much compost.
So somebody that's starting from ground zero, what compost material should they add? Compost or soil on top of sandy soil? Should they just go to the garden store and then somebody asks, should I get the compost from the dump?
Good questions. Good questions. I'm going to answer these. I'm going to warn you. I'm going to tell you the right answer, but it is not an easy answer. Yes, go to the dump, get out of your car, and if you can smell the compost, get back in your car and go home. If you can't smell the compost, then it's probably good compost. In my experience, I have never been to a municipal compost pile that was good compost. What it actually was reduced waste. If it's black in color, it was anaerobic at some point, which means it was bad. If you put it on your garden, it will probably be bad for your garden. It will probably kill plants. So yeah, you can go to the dump, check it out, see if it's good compost. But if it's black and if it smells bad, or if it is still hot and steaming, go home. You don't want those headaches. The best way to have compost is to make your own. My online classes for $8 a month has day-to-day, like I've made a compost and I videoed myself every single day on how to build the compost pile. And so there's like 30 videos in a row of how to do that compost pile. And it tells you how to do it so that it works. But anytime you're making a compost, if it stinks, it's going anaerobic. You have to turn it. You've got to keep it aerobic. So making your own compost is the best way. Many people can't make their own compost. You can buy compost from reputable people. I've never seen compost at a store, like a big box store, that was actually compost. Sometimes they will call potting soil compost. It's not compost. So if you're starting from square one and you're asking me this question, this was really disheartening to hear what I just told you. I understand that. If you don't have the compost option, you've got to do two things. Number one, get a compost pile started because you are going to need that. Number two, here's what you do. You go out in your yard, you find a place on your lawn. It's all grass, it's beautiful grass. and you figure out where you want your garden and how big you want it. And so let's say it's going to be 10 feet by 10 feet, and that's going to be your garden. Go to a store and get a whole bunch of cardboard boxes, like 50 cardboard boxes, or 5 or 6 giant ones that refrigerators and washing machines came in. If you can get big sheets, it's better. And then go get a bunch of peat moss and potting soil. And remember the slide earlier where it showed you how to make the potting mix? That's what you're going to make to start out your garden. But this is only if you don't have compost. So go home to your 10 by 10 plot on the grass and put your cardboard on there. Put it about 2 or 3 cardboard boxes thick. Make sure you are overlapping all of the cardboard so there's no spaces where the grass can come through. And then mix up your potting soil and your peat moss, put it on there about, 4, 5, 6 inches thick. And then you get your transplants, and you want your transplants ready to go the same day you make this. And you're going to put those in there. And of course, remember when you mix up your your potting soil and your peat moss, put those amendments in that I had earlier. That's the eggshells, blood meal, bone meal, azomite, and alfalfa meal. So mix that into the mix, and then you're ready to go. Water that, and it should start growing. Watch your plants. As you put your plants in there, watch them every day. Your plants will tell you if you need more fertilizer. There's a good chance that starting out with a potting mix like that, your plants will need more nutrients than what the original mix was. But potting soils are created differently. So it's hard to tell you to just go to the store and get a potting soil mix in a bag, because some of them could be a lot better than others. So if you start out with what I just told you, and then you need a gallon of fish hydrolysate. So that is like a fish fertilizer. And you can get those at any of these places, like a Home Depot, a Lowe's, a Walmart garden center. You need a gallon of that. And so like a teaspoon of that in a gallon of water, just follow the instructions. And if your plants begin to look at all like yellow at all, but you need to look at them every day. And if they look like they're not doing very good, you may need to start feeding them some, and you will feed them the fish hydrolysate at the rate that is on the bottle. Follow the instructions. And this will be a learning curve. This is a place to start, but it's a learning curve. If you're starting with a good compost that you've made, it's filled with all the good microbes, you probably won't need the fish hydrolysate. Hopefully this is simple. Yeah, I know there's a lot of information here. So, but just keep asking me and I'll answer it.
I have blackberry bulbs in clay. The brambles were cut back. I couldn't possibly hand pull all the roots. Then I till the soil to help get them out, then add organic matter on top of the tilled clay. Should I lay fabric down first?
Okay, I'm going to have Jared read that again, but let me start with the fabric part. I'm assuming you're talking about a weed barrier fabric. That is a really great product that people like to sell. I don't think it works very good. If you're talking about the compost, or the cardboard that I'm talking about putting down, if that's what you mean by fabric, that works pretty good because it decomposes quick. But a lot of those landscape fabrics, I've used like 10 different brands over the years, and a lot of your weeds will grow right through them. They might be good for about 6 months, and then stuff starts growing right through them. So I don't recommend those. I don't like them. Maybe they work in some landscaping situations if there's low water, but for vegetable gardens, for berries, where you're going to be watering them more, I would not recommend landscape fabrics for that application. Okay.
So then blackberry bulbs in clay, brambles were cut back. How do you get rid of the roots? Should you till it?
So it sounds like he's trying to kill the blackberries. Is this person from Oregon? So if you're trying, At first, I thought you were trying to plant blackberries. But if you're trying to kill blackberries because they're taking over everything, the cardboard method will work. I'd dig out as much root as you can. You could till that up to try to get rid of them. Tilling them is not going to kill them. But yeah, if you can just mow them back flat on the ground, cover that with cardboard, put 6-8 inches of old hay on top.
He's from Washington where they're invasive.
Oh yeah, he's trying to kill them. No, yeah, from Washington for sure. Yeah, Washington, Oregon, that area, they take over everything. So now I understand. Yeah, where I live, it's hard to get them to grow. So my mindset was a little bit different. So thank you for that clarification. But yeah, cut them back, mow them back to the ground, put the cardboard on top of them. If you had a really good high quality landscape fabric, it would probably work. The problem with a lot of those is they won't biodegrade, so it becomes a problem in future years if you want to do something. But yeah, but it cover your soil with 4 to 6 inches of a different kind of like a mulch, a compost. But I'd do 5 or 6 layers of cardboard. If you're talking about acres of this stuff, because I'm thinking somebody in their yard where you could actually do that practically. But if you're talking about acres of this, you could kill out anything and everything with a silage tarp. So if you went to farmersfriend.com, you can order a silage tarp there. If you have neighbors around that are dairymen, a lot of times they just have piles of old silage tarps. They're white on one side, black on the other. They're a pretty tough thing that dairy farmers will make silage out of. You can cover acres with that. You just need to put a lot of weight on it, old tires or stones or something, so it doesn't blow away in the wind. But if you have really bad invasive things, you could put that on there for a year, for 12 months, and it will kill out pretty much everything. If you take it off and something starts growing back, then you probably needed a year and a half. So that's pretty drastic, but it will cleanse your soil of all plant life. I only recommend that in really drastic situations, though.
Half acre of brambles, want to grow this season. So what is that?
Yeah. So
when you use that, what does it do to the microbiology in the soil? Are you going to re-inoculate that?
Yeah. So if you use the silage tarp, it would kill a lot of your microbiology in the soil. So during that time, you would want to be growing a really good compost so that you have the microbes, so that when the tarp comes off, you would want to re-inoculate that soil with those microbes, so that your soil is functioning once again. But half an acre, that's a lot, but you want to grow in it this season. Yeah, I mean, if you can get out there and dig a lot of them out, that'd be great. If you're wanting to make raised beds to do vegetables, you could certainly do and you're going to have aisles between the raised beds. The aisles were as wide as your lawnmower. You could just mow whatever comes up, and then only put the cardboard down where the raised bed is, and then put your garden soil on top. Half an acre, that's a big deal. So maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you would say take half of it, do the tarp problem, and then just grow on it this year and fight the weeds with a hoe. And then next year, the one that you tarped this year is ready to go. And then you can tarp the other one. And so you can kind of cleanse them that way. So, I mean, I know that sets your whatever you're wanting to grow on it this year back, but sometimes that's a good thing to do. The thing is, blackberries, they're not as invasive as quackgrass or morning glories. I know in that area, I mean, I was living in the Willamette Valley for 3 or 4 years, and so I understand blackberries being invasive. But if you're out there working with a hoe and a mower, you can kill them out. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, looks like we got about 10 minutes left. I would like to hear a little bit about what you see as far as food security what can families really do to be able to insulate ourselves from the threats of food scarcity? And, I know that's a big question, but where does somebody start? And
Okay, so food security, because we live in a crazy world. Global food supplies are lower now than they have been my entire life. And people on the earth are making some really stupid decisions. The Ukraine is huge. Most of it is flat, beautiful farmland. It grows a large amount of wheat, and it's not getting planted. So anyway, it's not getting planted at this time because the war is happening. And there's a lot of other problems. There's major droughts in the world right now. There are major problems with, I don't know, just turn on the news and you'll see the problems. I'm going to spend this time on talking about the solutions. So here is my solution to the current problems that we could be seeing in the near future. Plant a garden and eat what you grow. Okay, that's my solution. I'm done. Now let me make that a little bit more simple for you. Pick a garden method. I don't care what garden method it is. If you know how to grow food using Miracle-Gro, and the things that I've talked about tonight are scaring you, stick with me for the 20 weeks and I will teach you how to grow food the way I'm talking. But for this season, get started using the methods you already know. And after 20 weeks, you will have a pretty good handle on how to do it. If Miracle-Gro becomes too expensive, if fuel for tilling becomes too expensive, if some of these problems we're seeing in the world stop you from gardening, I can teach you how to do this without all of those man-made inputs. If you're relying on pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and sterile soil to start your seeds and grow lights and electricity and all the things that we're used to in this country, go ahead and garden that way. Get a garden going. And during the next 20 weeks, I will be talking about how to produce food if some of these blessings we have go away. I don't think they're going to go away, but I still want to teach this because the nutritional value of the food is much better if we grow it with the methods that I teach instead of using all the products that are available at the local garden center. So I have this slide up here, and this helps to answer that quite a bit. And so this is just understanding the ecological role of things. I used to see pests as a huge problem. Pests were like this big deal. Interestingly, though, in my personal gardens throughout my life, I've had very small pest pressure, but I always feared that they would be this huge problem. Okay, but now I understand that when we are working with nature, pests are simply a cleanup crew of unnatural phenomena that happen. So if I have 100 acres of one crop and I keep all of the weeds out, that is a very unnatural thing to happen in ecology. We don't find that in the world. And so pests come in and they breed there and they grow and they thrive. And ecologically, the pest is just cleaning up something weird that's happening. Okay. Disease is the same thing, because disease are going to start decomposing things that are unnatural. Weeds are an important thing. See, I used to think weeds were a big problem, and I have had a lot of weed problems throughout my growing, but I don't have weed pressure now. Now, I have to be clear here. I do have weeds, and in fact, today I even planted some weed seeds in my garden. That sounds like the craziest thing in the world. But if I know that the weeds are present, the weed seeds are present, if they grow in my garden, then I can tell what's happening ecologically in my garden.
So weeds are a blessing, because if I get a whole bunch of, say, red root amaranth and lamb's quarters germinating and growing in my garden, that is telling me that I don't have enough fungus growing in my soil. And what that means is that my plants are not going to have enough ammonium, which is a form of nitrogen. And so by knowing these things, I adjust what's happening. And so what do? Well, I need more fungus. So how do I get more fungus? I put more woody mulch on my soil. So I want to have, or the fungus is dead, so I would inoculate the soil with a compost that had a high fungal content. And once we understand these ecological roles of what's actually happening out there in the garden, then I can grow the best food ever without any man-made inputs. The only thing that comes close to man-made is me making compost. So there's a lot of things that are super complex, but I can manage those things. But they're not complicated. See, if electricity breaks, that's complicated because I don't know how to make it. If a rototiller breaks and there's not an auto parts store because of social problems, wars, famines, whatever, then that's complicated. I can't fix my rototiller, but I already know how to garden. The most complicated piece of equipment I have is a pitchfork. And I can actually keep my pitchfork going pretty good for probably the rest of my life if I take care of it. So, you know, I hope this didn't scare everybody.
It's been good. I think it's been great. I think it's got a lot of interaction, had people from all over the United States here. Good feedback, good input. Any final words you want to say? I guess one last question, buying heirloom seeds, that kind of ties in. And then
yeah, heirloom seeds. Yeah. So yeah, everybody wants heirloom seeds in case there's an apocalypse. Let me learn how to use my computer. Okay, so yeah, here's where I like to get seeds. This by no means that these are the best or only seed companies. There's hundreds of great seed companies out there, but heirloom seeds is a real problem. First of all, you've got to know that I absolutely love heirloom seeds. But if there was a major crack in the system and all you had were heirloom seeds, you're going to struggle to feed yourself, because heirloom seeds were adapted a long time ago to a climate a long ways away. And that's why we love them so much, is because great-great-great-grandma had these in her English garden, or she had them in Tuscany in Italy, and she brought them to America, and they've been the same variety for years and years, and they're open pollinated. And that's why we want them, is because we can save the seed and we know we're going to get food from them. If we can't buy seeds, we can save seeds from heirlooms. The problem is heirlooms are not resistant to the pests and the diseases, and they're not adapted to the soils where I live and where you live in the United States. So if we want heirlooms, we need to breed our own heirlooms, and that sounds like an oxymoron to heirloom purists. And I'm not here to offend anybody, but if there was a crack in the system, I hope you have a diversity of seeds that go far beyond heirlooms. But I've heard people say heirloom, because it's going to save them in apocalyptic times. And what is going to happen is there's going to be a lot of people starving to death because heirloom seeds don't produce enough volume to feed people. So yeah, I love heirlooms, but I love them for the heirloom quality. The heirloom quality is flavor, taste, novelty, and family history and cultural interest. They're not a great thing to produce a lot of food to feed a lot of people when there's no more food on grocery store shelves. So what is my answer? Get a variety of a lot of seeds. Maybe don't get the GMO seeds, but get a lot of the hybrids. Get a lot of your AAS winners, because those have been proven to grow in most of the climates around the country. So yeah, our time's about up. So thank you for joining us. If you need to know how to grow food, like right now, go to my Patreon page and you can sign up. I have over 250 videos there right now that you can watch on how to do all this. It's only $8 a month. And if you want more in-depth classes, we have the classes here on the farm this year. So, and all the information is right here on the screen in red on my website. So,
one last question, book suggestions. So what if people,
Books,
what
yeah.
if people jump on your email list and you send that to them?
send what?
Your
My
classic gardening books. Besides
Oh.
yours, I put a plug in for your
yeah.
book. I told them just read that because that's
Yeah, I have a book. Yeah, I wrote a book. Imagine that. I've been trying to write a book for 20 years and I just can't do it. But finally I got it done. So it's pretty awesome. I have a book. The problem is it's not published, but it is done. I'm going back through for a final edit now, and then I'm going to be sending it to like 20 or 30 people who are, a bunch of you are probably here. Like 5 or 6 months ago, I said, who wants to read my book? It'll be done in a few weeks. Well, a few months later, it finally is almost ready to send. It might be another 4 to 6 weeks before it's ready to send out to my beta reader group to see if it is even readable. And then
It's good.
and then yeah, Jared's been reading it. So yeah, my book is coming. So what are we saying to send to people? Oh yeah, I'll send stuff.
So just the list of your classic gardening books.
Yeah, I have favorite books. I'll send that. Yeah. So send me your email and I can.
So just click on the link that I shared and that will get William your email, and then we can put together an email with your classic books
Yeah.
for gardening.
Yep.
Send it out to everybody.
Yeah.
I hesitate to interrupt, but Charla actually just asked a really good question that I know you like to talk about, Dad, and maybe you want to take 2 seconds and answer it.
Okay. Yeah, keep going, Zeke. Let's hear the question.
She says, can we save and grow from certain hybrid seeds like the heirlooms? I'd love to see your must-buy list. I think she'd be interested to hear about your landrace projects you've been working on.
Oh man. 2 seconds, Ezekiel.
Maybe that's
Okay,
unrealistic.
so this webinar is going for another 10 minutes at least. Charlotte, where are you from? Do we know? So yes, you can absolutely save seeds from hybrids.
She's from Washington.
She's from Washington.
Washington. I make new varieties of seeds. I have a seed project going on. You've got to understand, heirloom varieties have a bottleneck in their genetics. That's why when you plant the seed, it's basically the same thing every year. So if you have your favorite heirloom tomato, and it's been the same for 20 years, and you love the flavor and it always stays the same, that's because it has a bottleneck in its genetics. It stays the same. That's what I mean by bottleneck. But to create new varieties, meaning you adapt it to your local area so that it has disease resistance and pest resistance, then you need to open up that bottleneck so that that old-fashioned heirloom tomato remembers its genetics from 2,000 years ago. If you can get a plant to remember its genetic code that it has not expressed for the last 200 generations of growing, then it can do all kinds of things that it doesn't know it can do. And the way to do that is to create a hybrid. So when you plant a hybrid seed, what you're doing in that next generation is it has opened up the bottleneck and you will have all kinds of weird fruits. And that's why people are afraid to plant hybrids, is because, well, if I plant the hybrid, it's not going to produce the same. It's not going to breed true. And then we get all these things. The best one is you get frankenfruits. Well, it's just funny to think about this. Now, if you're a commercial farmer and your customers grow a round tomato that is red and 8 ounces, and that's what they want, then you better not be planting the hybrid seed and expecting to get that, because you will get different sizes, shapes, colors, flavors. Some of the plants may not produce a fruit. Some of the plants may be shaped funny. So you're going to get all of these weird things, but that is exactly what you want. But better than that, take a 10-acre field and order 200 different varieties of corn, and then you mix up all of the seed. So you would have heirloom varieties. You would have, hybrids. You would have every variety you can get your hands on. You mix up all the seed, you plant them in that field, and then you have a criteria that you select for. And you would pick for one thing out of that field. So maybe you want all yellow ears of corn, or maybe you want all red ones. And so you would start picking for the characteristics you want. And so say you have 3 characteristics. You're going to have a red corn. You want a tall corn. Then you want one that the ears don't get eaten by raccoons. So the ears would be up on the stalk about 5 feet high in the air. Okay. You may only get 5 stalks or 5 ears of corn that meet that requirement from that field that year. So you plant those the next year. And then you may have 40 ears of corn and you plant those the next year. And so by selectively breeding the specific traits you want, then after, say, like 5, 6, 8 years, you will have an entire field that all looks the same. Guess what you have? You have a new variety, and you can name it after yourself or whatever you want. And if you actually do that, send me some seed. I want to see this. This is awesome. But this is a landrace breeding, and it's kind of a new thing, except for the fact that it's been being done for tens of thousands of years by illiterate people. All of the great varieties we have today were bred from people who never went to school because they were cavemen, basically. Think about ancient peoples breeding the foods that we eat today. As soon as agriculture was happening, they were selecting the wheat and the oats and the rye and the barley, the corns, the millets, the amaranths, the quinoas, the tomatoes, the peaches. All the things we're eating today were mostly bred by illiterate people, and now we have these great things to work from. There's a modern plant breeder, and he only had a high school education. His name is, when I think of it, I'll tell you.
Joseph Lofthouse.
Different guy. Joseph Lofthouse is the guy who taught me about landrace breeding, but this guy lived around the turn of the century, 1900s. Anyway, I'll look it up and I'll let you know. But anyway, you don't have to have 7 PhDs in botany and plant breeding and genetics and all this stuff to be a plant breeder. Now that I've told you all this, I do need to put a plug in for the laws that exist in the United States. It is against the law to save seed from a lot of varieties. So if you choose to be a law-abiding citizen, which I think you should be, then you need to be careful planting certain seeds, because a lot of them are patented and it's against the law to save seed from them. So now that you know the law, now you can do this legally. Hopefully that answered your question. I'm hoping that was clear. We could spend 2 or 3 hours on that. But that was my nutshell of landrace breeding. So that's pretty exciting. So join us next week, same time, same place. And I think next week I'm going to pick a topic. I will send out a reminder with the link on my Facebook page. If you got this link from a different place that was shared, because I think I had 60 shares, and then who knows who shared it from those shares. So if you're not friends with me on Facebook, you need to watch Facebook, sign up, give me your email so that you can get these, so you know where we're at. Yeah, but we will continue on. The goal of this is to help you have the best garden ever, learning how to actually feed your family. We want to drastically increase the amount of food that you are producing, and we want to produce this in the most healthy way possible by mimicking nature and avoiding the man-made inputs that do tend to decrease the nutritional value of foods. But start out gardening this year with whatever method you're used to, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, you can convert over as you learn and understand the principles that I am talking about. There's nothing you can do to your garden that will mess it up so bad that you can't convert it over once you learn the principles. The main thing is start gardening, start producing food, because you, your family, your community need more food production. So thank you for joining. I appreciate you and good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, William.
Thank you very much.